All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Willpower Podcast. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to be in a actual recovery space that is near and dear to me because it is my hometown of Boston. And I am just so excited to be here and be able to talk with you, Angela Kelly. How are you today?
I'm good, Will. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, this is a pleasure. So Angela Kelly is the clinical supervisor with a master's of clinical counseling.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Nailed it.
And I'm really excited to have a conversation with you today because this is right in my backyard and I would be doing a huge disservice to come here and interview all of you here. So this is going to be exciting.
Yeah, a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So Angela, my first question is how do you help clients rebuild their identity beyond being an addict?
Identity and purpose is something that comes up so often in therapy, whether it's individual or in groups. And we try to just establish like who you are as a person. Who do you want to be now that you're trying to rebrand yourself, essentially? And we can't get rid of the parts of us. They're always going to exist, whether they're good or bad or indifferent. They're always going to be inside of us. But we need to figure out which parts we want to keep and accentuate and which parts we need to dull down a little bit. So for folks coming in for addiction recovery, it takes a little bit of time to figure out who this person is. Mm-hmm. A lot of time folks come in and one of the questions that they're asked in their initial intake with a therapist is, what are your hobbies? And I can't tell you the amount of times people are like, I have no idea. Mm-hmm. My hobbies aren't existing anymore. Yeah. So we kind of have to start from ground zero and build back up. But what I like to make sure people are aware of is that you still exist as the person that you were. What we're trying to find out are the parts that you want to keep and the parts that maybe you need to not get rid of, but we need to dull down a little bit so that the addiction tendencies and behaviors aren't as glaring, if you will. So we have to start from the bottom, and it takes a little bit of time, and it can be really scary for folks to not know who they are.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about that personal place. You know, I felt like when I was in active addiction for those 10 straight years of severe alcohol abuse, I felt like I did not have many hobbies. You know, it was really hard to find my true authentic self once I said I'm done and I'm going to be sober for the rest of my life. That was really hard. So I can only imagine that being really difficult coming from the clinical side of it in helping them out there. We talked a little bit about this with Blase, but what role does family therapy play in long-term recovery success? Like how much does that play into it?
It really depends on the person. In my personal experience, I'm not in recovery myself, but my family is riddled with addicts. Yeah. Some who are still with us and some who are not. Mm-hmm. And from a personal standpoint, if the family's more involved, they have better chances of having a better support system. Yeah. But oftentimes when someone comes into recovery, that trust has been broken. So in order for the family to feel like they are beneficial to the client, there has to be a level of trust that's rebuilt, and that can only be done by action. Mm-hmm. So it starts slow, I would say, but over time we build in those therapy sessions with family if the client would allow. Yeah. Something that Greater Boston Addiction Center does do is family support meetings as well. So no clients are there. It's just for clients' loved ones to come in and ask us any questions that they need, and any questions that they need answers, any questions that they, might have about the process. Because what happens so frequently is people come in and they're in therapy all day, and then they get home and they're done. They don't want to talk about it anymore. Yeah. Or they're in sober living and they don't get a chance to see their family. So we try to build in those supports around family as often as we can. And I would say the clients who have the biggest chances of success have some level of support, whether it be blood family or found family.
Yeah. This is a question that I had written down that I really wanted to ask you. So how do you balance flexibility in treatment while maintaining structure? And what I mean by that is, obviously in recovery, you want to be flexible. You don't want to be overbearing, right? So how do you balance the flexibility part, but you also need that structure? Because I felt like for me in my recovery, I definitely needed structure. I lacked it huge. Mm-hmm. So because of that, I fell off the wagon. So how do you do that? How do you do that here?
Yeah, the structure is important. And I mean, something that I hear all of the time is how beneficial they feel a program is, because they're there from 9 to 3 every day. And then when that, titrates down and they're not there, they're like, well, what do I do with my time? Right? Because that hobby piece, maybe they don't have anything going on that they can focus their attention on. Typically, idle time doesn't do someone super well, right?
No, it does not.
So we have to figure out what is going to work for that client, whether it's integrating school or work or, pottery class or something recreational. And what is nice about our program over at GBAC, Greater Boston Addiction Center, is that we have a lot of different varieties. So folks can be in person, they can do evening program, they can do a Saturday, they can do virtual. So we try to have enough structure there with enough flexibility that they can have all of their needs met, whether that's inside the program or outside.
Great. What's unique about providing addiction treatment in the Boston area?
So Greater Boston Addiction Centers was the first one in the Greater Boston area. And since we came to be in 2021, there's a smattering of programs now. And what's different about being here is probably just the frequency of people who are really in need and the amount that families want to be involved, because we're located in Needham, which is a more affluent area, right? So typically with that, families are more prone to ask questions. They're more prone to be involved. And that can cause some disruption at the beginning. But I think overall, the way that we approach it with, starting small and building into more like integration with the family is the best chance for that client to have the better outcome. And also being in the Boston area, we have a lot of access to things. So whether it's, like those pottery classes I was talking about or cooking classes, they might not be right next door to you, but they're probably 2 towns over. Yeah. So the ability and the access that we have here is really beneficial to the client's well-being.
Yeah, this just came to my mind as you were talking. What do you think in Boston in particular would be like the drug or whatever that people are struggling with most, do you think?
I mean, fentanyl is an epidemic right now. And unfortunately, it's at a place where it's in everything. So even if you feel like you're a 100% cocaine user, when we do those drug tests and it comes back, it may not be 100% cocaine.
Right.
Right now, I think we have a good deal of alcoholism. But I would say like fentanyl has been very prevalent recently, certainly in Boston and the surrounding areas.
Yeah.
Methamphetamine is also a big one that we handle too.
For methamphetamine, how do you go ahead and treat that? Because that one's a really tricky one, I feel like. I have personal family members that struggle with that substance, and I noticed that it's really difficult to get them help and support because that drug in particular, it's like a whole different demon. It's like,
it kind of takes a lot of the person away from their own self, if that makes sense.
No, it does, yeah.
And honestly, meth is most prevalent in the LGBTQ community. Because it's used a lot when there are sexual encounters. So that adds a whole new kind of slew of things that you have to deal with when you're trying to take that away and make sure that the person feels capable being themselves without that drug. And thankfully, Blase has done the service of opening up this center so that they can focus on that more and be more vulnerable and authentic in the groups when talking about that. Because sex and relationships, even though we only treat adults, it's still a taboo subject for some, and they may not be super comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
Meth is a very tricky one.
It's a very tricky one. And I like how you put that, how it kind of like steals your identity, your soul in a sense, right? What's the most powerful transformation that you've witnessed in the aftercare part of counseling?
When like after seeing someone success story?
Yeah, like a success story.
I've seen quite a few, thankfully. And probably the one that comes to my head most as you ask that question, I had a younger client, I want to say he was like 28, 29 maybe, alcohol, marijuana, and was super depressed, like very depressed. If you met him, he'd, be super pleasant, but you could just tell that he was not well. And he came back, he boomeranged a couple of times. That happens all of the time. Yeah. Because they come back because they're comfortable and they know that they feel some level of success happening when they're with us. He came back, I think, twice. And he is now 18 months clean. He has a niece that he gets to interact with. He has a full-time job. He's living with his girlfriend, and he's still the music producer as well. I'm not going to drop his name, but if he gives me permission, maybe I can put it in the comments. He's doing really, really well and is still connected to the community. He goes to AA. That's, something that he likes and he enjoys and felt benefit from. And it's just wonderful to see someone who had such potential actually see it in themselves and fulfill it.
That's so great. You just talked about AA a little bit. And something I always like to talk to with people, especially people on the clinical side of things. For AA, for me, I love it in the sense that I can always just bump jump into a meeting if I'm feeling like overwhelmed in the craving of drinking is comes into play. But I've also noticed in my recovery, I've met a ton of people who have found different avenues, myself included there, when it comes to AA, because it can be a little too structured. Do you believe that AA is the end all be all, or do you think it's more of like a broader spectrum when it comes to the idea of recovery?
I think if it was the end all be all, everyone would be sober, right? Yeah. Because it's accessible, it's everywhere.
Sure.
And I have a lot of my family members who struggle with addiction. I have an uncle who's been clean for 40 plus years, and he is AA through and through. Now, his drug of choice was cocaine, but at the time that he was getting sober in the 80s, NA wasn't really a thing.
Right.
I think that AA can be extremely beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's the only thing that's beneficial.
Right.
And I know people who go completely cold turkey on their own. I know people who use AA, people who use Smart Recovery, Dharma, Refuge Recovery. There's a whole bunch of them out there and available.
Mm-hmm.
You need to find what works for you.
Right.
And if it doesn't work, that's okay. There's a lot of different options.
Yeah, you got to find like what works for you. I feel like we like to put people into a box of recovery. I feel like sometimes, and that's so wonderful that you are embracing the idea of how you can go into many different areas and find what works for you.
Absolutely.
Right? I noticed this on your website. You said, how does your evidence-based approach differ from traditional treatment? Yes.
Yeah. So we use a whole smattering of modalities at GBAC. And GBAC has expanded to have Greater Boston Behavioral Health Center as well. So now we have a mental health track too over there. And the modalities can be used interchangeably. Mm-hmm. Folks that come for just mental health treatment can get the same kind of curriculum or the same kind of groups that someone struggling with substance comes for. And that's because, the therapy that we use is based on the needs of the clients. So we have staff who stay in the know, who are educated around, recovery, mental health, the whole thing. But making sure that they're using approaches that work for the individuals is key. So we try to make whatever evidence-based approach, whether it's CBT, DBT, ACT, EMDR, all those fun acronyms that we have there, we try to make sure that it's specific to the person.
Sure.
So when they're getting that information in a group setting, it's more high level. And if they feel like they connect to something, then they bring that to their one-on-one and they explore it.
Angela, do you only focus on just the greater Boston area?
So we have clients actually from a few different states. So whether they are virtually attending, or we've had clients come in from New Hampshire, New York. I think we've had some folks from Florida, California. I mean, we are accessible to folks outside of Massachusetts and outside of the Boston area should they want to attend. So if anybody is listening out of state or within the country, we got to stay within the country. But if anyone's listening who wants to come by and check us out or get involved, they absolutely can.
Perfect. All right. Terrific. Okay. That's great. That's great. How do you help clients rebuild trust in themselves during treatment? Because I know from my own personal experience, it was hard to do that, right? So how do you approach that here?
I want to know what they want to see from themselves. I set goals for them from a clinical standpoint, but my goals are more of a measure of where I feel like their success is from a clinical standpoint, not from a personal standpoint, right? So I need to hear from them what their goals are. And I think when they see themselves actually achieving those goals and they break down a big goal into smaller ones, and then they get to check those boxes instead of setting themselves up for failure, biting off more than they can chew at the beginning, that helps them rebuild trust in themselves. Also, like not caving into cravings and being honest about them and having positive reinforcement when they are honest and they are successful.
Yeah. What innovations in addiction treatment give you the most hope?
I mean, the fact that research never stops is the biggest thing for me. And the more we talk about it and it becomes less of a taboo thing, we reduce the stigma, that is what gives me the most hope. It's not necessarily from a clinical standpoint. The stuff that we do is, has been around for ages and it gets better as more research comes out. But the fact that it's a conversation that can be had now without the side glances or like the gasping when it's mentioned, when either like cravings are mentioned, drugs or the behavior around it, reducing the stigma and seeing how much better folks have become in talking about it, whether they're the addict themselves or, within their like nuclear family or extended circle, that is bringing me the most hope that the stigma is reducing over time.
Yeah, I would agree with you in that one. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know how busy you all are here, and I'm so grateful that you allowed me to come in here and do my show and also get to know a little bit more about the Greater Boston Addiction Center. So thank you so much. If people are curious about maybe getting a little more info, can you tell us like where to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. We are on essentially all social media platforms, either at GBAC _ GBAC, I believe, on Instagram. We have a Facebook page as well. We also have a website, as most places do in 2025. I believe is greaterbostonAddictionCenter.com, but you might want to Google that one first. And we're on TikTok as well, and it's always a party over there. So if you want to go over to TikTok and see us dance, you can do it.
I have, and it's really fun. And that was actually what we're going to do after this. So just
awesome.
So everyone knows. Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on my show. Thank you so much, everyone here that participated in this and setting it up. And I'm excited to continue to work with you guys as time goes on. So thank you so everyone.
Much, Will.
Blase, welcome to the Willpower Podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Will. It's great to be here.
It's great to be here. So, Blase, this is your facility, correct?
Yes, it is.
Can you tell us a little bit about what this awesome space that I'm looking at is?
Yeah, so Society Wellness Group is a PHP IOP program for substance abuse and behavioral health that's specifically focused towards the LGBTQ community.
Okay. So it's primarily focused on the LGBTQ community.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what makes that different than like a regular community?
So I think the thing about it is that when you're coming into a place and you're struggling with substance abuse and behavioral health, you're coming in and you need to be able to be vulnerable and to be honest with what's going on around you. What I found is that a lot of times when people are coming into these groups, they aren't able to be themselves transparently. I've been in this field for a while and I've been running groups for a long time. And sometimes I can see my clients mentally filtering what they want to say so that they can make it more palatable for the people around them. And when you're coming into treatment, you have to be able to be completely yourself, completely transparent. Things like your sexuality or your gender identity shouldn't be something that you feel like you have to hide behind. Because for a lot of the community, those are parts of the reasons why they're here. So being able to talk about these things in a place where they're understood is very important.
Yeah. You talked about, right then, people hiding who they are, right? And I would say that is one of the biggest factors in sobriety is like they're not scared of what they might say, right? So this community, this space is a welcoming place, right? What makes this community, say, different than other LGBTQ communities? Maybe let's focus on like how is Boston different than other ones? What do you think?
Well, so I think that Boston is so it's like both very liberal and very conservative at the same time. People who've lived here for generations and things like that. So there's like people come from towns where their entire family lives there and stuff. And like I think that a lot of people have a lot of pressure of what their parents thought they would be or of what society thinks that they should be. So, I mean, today is very different than it was 10, 15 years ago. But I think that trying to battle with the pressures and the hopes that families have on you and then trying to navigate what that is for yourself can become very difficult and very overwhelming.
In your experience, like what do you notice is one of the hardest parts for someone to seek treatment? Like what do you think people are struggling with the most? What do you think? Like what do you think people are coming in here for the most?
I mean, so I'd say that it's a mixture. It really depends, but a lot of times people are having a hard time admitting that they need help in general, right? Mm-hmm. So people may struggle with substances, but they think it's because of a mental health problem, or they have a mental health problem and they think it's because of the substances that they struggle with. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's kind of like this question of like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, am I depressed because I'm on drugs, or am I on drugs because I'm depressed? So I think that having a place where you can come in that's able to deal with both of those things at the same time and get you to a base level so that we can start to approach the root of what's actually going on is super important.
So important, isn't it? Yeah, I know. From my own experience, I had such an issue with just coming out and saying that I needed help. So it's so cool that what you're doing here is you're welcoming all walks of life, right?
Yeah.
Which is awesome, especially in the Boston area where it can be maybe a little backwards or a little not as progressive as we would want it, right? So how do you help clients navigate both addiction recovery and potential family?
So I think that just trying to help people find who their support system is very important. Having family involvement can be one of the greatest strengths someone has in their process, but not everybody comes from a healthy family. Not everyone comes from a healthy home. So being able to figure out what that network of support looks like, and I don't think that it matters whether you're here for substances or whether you're here dealing with behavioral health things. Like, what we're looking for so much is connection, to feel like we're not alone. Like, that's what brought us into these places in the first place. Yeah. So being able to have a community of like-minded people who understand what's going on can be something that is extremely pivotal in someone's recovery process.
Mm-hmm. What's an obstacle that you've noticed when you have someone coming in with like a difficult family background? Have you noticed that?
I think that for a client to come in here and be able to be honest about what's going on is very important for them. So when they come in and they feel understood and they feel heard, because most of the times they go home and they don't feel understood by their family, they don't feel heard. And a family has years of experience of different things that have caused them to be in the position that they're in right now. So having an unbiased third party be able to just listen to everything and help them navigate that, I think is something that a lot of people don't have, because they have all these pressures and insecurities of how they think they should be or how their family wants them to be, that they're not adding up, that they don't feel like they can live up to. So for us to be able to listen to somebody and figure out what it is that works best for them, and how to help them be either a part of their family or how to help them find support systems outside of their family if their family dynamic isn't a safe one for them.
So is that what you guys can do? Can you like help them find different support systems? I know you are the support system, but also finding other different support systems outside of that family. How does that process work? Like how would you approach that?
Of course. I mean, so it depends. Everybody's so very different. So it may be different things for every person. But like if a person's coming in recovery, right, we may try to help someone find a sober living situation or outside meetings and stuff like that, so that they can start to really create this recovery network around them. In other places, there's so many different kinds of groups. The community aspect is wildly important, and especially for the LGBTQ community, to be able to tap into that is something that we're really trying to get, because I think that especially in today's age, so many people are very isolated. So many people connect primarily through like the internet and through their phones and through social media and stuff like that. But interpersonal connection in real life, like that real face-to-face time, is so important for somebody feeling like they're alone. To feel like you're a part of something bigger than you can make a huge difference in someone's life.
What was the inspiration behind the Society Wellness Group?
So Society Wellness Group was kind of a collaborative effort between the sober house that I have, Society House, and Greater Boston Addiction Centers. When I started working at Greater Boston Addiction Centers 4 years ago, we were brand new. We had just opened, and we started to get a lot of LGBTQ clients. And in the treatment field, every treatment center says that they're LGBTQ friendly. And to me, I find that like kind of patronizing, because it's like, it's 2025 now. What do you mean you're LGBTQ friendly? You know what I mean? So it was very important to me that being LGBTQ friendly wasn't how we advertised ourselves, that we were allies of the community, that we supported people, that we were an affirming environment for people, so that they could come in and they didn't feel like they had to explain their identity or have to justify those parts of themselves. Because I find that for a lot of people, like that's why they're in here, is by feeling misunderstood. Working at GBAC, I was able to create a safe place for a lot of people that just organically, naturally happens. The staff, everybody was always very supportive of this idea. And about 2 years ago, I opened Society House, which is really the only LGBTQ sober living house in the Greater Boston area. That just like naturally grew into what it was. So being able to put those two things together, kind of to create safe spaces, because especially today, safe spaces are so important for everybody. Sure. I think that the LGBTQ community feels very targeted and very attacked. So having a place where they don't have to feel like they're on guard, where they feel like they can speak authentically about the things that are going on, and that they don't have to be worried that they're going to offend the person next to them, I think is so important for people in this process right now. Because
you really can't have any kind of blanket on you when you're approaching recovery, right? You really need to be as open and vulnerable and objective as humanly possible. So that's so wonderful that you've created a space like that in the Greater Boston area to advocate for such a need, which I'm sure people are really struggling with, right? Beautiful. Well, thank you, Blase, for coming on. I really appreciate it, man. This was a blast talking to you. And I'm really excited to see where you go from here, man. You're absolutely changing the game. I mean, to exclude a certain group of people out of recovery is just insane to me. So I'm so proud that you are able to facilitate something like this. So congratulations on that.
Thank you so much, Will.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
Thank you everyone out there for watching, and be on the lookout for many, many more episodes coming soon. Take care, everybody.